Hello guys, my name is SVB and I'm back with another video, and today I'm going to be doing my first ever update on a video I've previously made. Now a while back, I started a series called Thought Process where I broke down each role in Overwatch and looked at which heroes you'd pick in which scenarios and more importantly, why you'd pick them. Now these were quite popular and I think you guys really enjoyed them. But of course, these videos were made before role lock was introduced into the game, so while the general principles behind the roles of each hero still remain true, there are definitely some big changes that have occurred since then, so I thought I'd make a little update for you guys to help you navigate this whole new world we found ourselves in. Now I'm going to start with supports, who now that 3-3 isn't meta anymore, have seen quite a shift in terms of who's viable and who's not. Before we begin, I just want to remind you that if at any point you learn something new or see something you like, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. And also make sure you're following my Twitter for dank memes and hot takes, as well as my Twitch. But other than that, let's get to it guys. Now before I get into talking about the supports themselves, I think it makes sense that I briefly discuss the general meta shift that has taken place and how this has impacted the role of supports. Since the last video, role lock was implemented and Sigma was introduced into the game, which meant that the double shield comp, that being Orisa Sigma, has become the meta tank line. Subsequently, support and DPS picks became revolved around how they interacted with shields, and namely their ability to bypass or ignore them. In that light, Moira became the strongest support pick because she could actually heal through shields, and we'll get into talking about her later. But this also meant that certain support picks became almost completely unviable, at least in games where double shield was being played. However, currently, there's a new patch on the PTR which will probably drop soon in live that has seen a major nerf to shields, so let's briefly touch on what that might mean for the meta in broad terms. Firstly, sorry to break it to you guys, but it's likely that Orisa Sigma will still be the strongest tank line because they have the best survivability. In Overwatch at the moment, being able to survive is the strongest commodity, and the reason why is part of a much larger discussion I'll have at another time. However, with the speed buff to Rein and the fact that shields will actually be breakable now, it's likely that other comps will actually see a lot more play, which is always good news, and it also means that the supports you pick should be a little bit more flexible now. So, with that out of the way, let's talk supports then. Last time, I started off discussing Lucio, so we'll keep that little bit of consistency going and see what's changed for our beat dropping friend. So since role lock was introduced, Lucio's actually had a slight buff to his abilities, namely that his speed boost numbers were reverted back to what they were pre-GOAT's nerfs. Now in the previous version of this video, I spoke about how Lucio was basically the best support in the game, and you'd think that with all these buffs, he'd be even stronger now, right? Well, not quite. Lucio's still strong, but not quite the essential pick he once was. Firstly, in the double shield meta, teams move around a lot less, which consequently means he uses his speed boost a lot less as well. On top of that, now that sustain comps are the most important things in Overwatch, healers with big healing outputs are the #1 priority. That being said, his AoE healing is still very good, and particularly when used with the amp up, he can still put out a great amount of healing, so he's still a very strong pick. On top of that, Sound Barrier is still a great ult, and in some cases, absolutely necessary to have. If you're up against a Ryan Zarya, it can still be used to counter the grab, but more importantly, if you're up against Sigma in any combo of tank with him, then the Sound Barrier is basically the only support ult that can reliably save the multiple team members that get caught in the zone of the Gravitic Flux, which is actually even more deadly than a Graviton Surge. So where does all this leave Lucio? Well, like most of the history of Overwatch, Lucio is still a strong and stable pick. Unlike what he often was, he's not a must pick anymore, and you will see support lines being run without him a lot more. If you're running a Ryan comp, you will definitely want him, but if not, you could still make do without him. Next, it would be only right to talk about the biggest winner in the double shield meta, Moira. Now in the previous version of this video, I was quite critical of her because I said that she's a healer with very little utility, and because of that, I said there weren't too many reasons to pick her over other healers. But boy have things changed since then. As I mentioned, the general mentality of Overwatch has shifted to prioritizing survivability a lot more, and in that scenario, not only does Moira give you a lot more healing, but she also gives you great survivability herself with her Wraith form, which can get her out of trouble easily, and the longer you live, the more you can keep your teammates up for. On top of this, in the double shield meta, she's one of the few healers who can actually bypass shields with multiple abilities. Both her orbs do this, and of course her coalescence can be used to both heal and damage players through shields, but also kill things like Orisa's supercharger. So, up till now, it wouldn't be inaccurate to say that Moira was arguably the most dominant pick in the support slot. However, it's possible that with the PTR changes, this might change again slightly. With shields actually being breakable now and less of a direct problem, we're probably going to see supports who can interact with shields become a little bit stronger, namely the ones with an ability to help contribute to spamming shields down, heroes like Baptiste and Zen, who we'll talk about later. So we'll have to wait and watch on this one to see exactly where Moira lands on the viability scale, but regardless, with survivability being such a key part of Overwatch now, there's no way that Moira will be anything other than a good pick for the foreseeable future. Obviously, she's not great in a dive setup, but any comp where your team stays together, be that double shield or Ryan Zarya, she will still get lots of value. So Moira mains can rejoice, she's in a very good place. Now next, I think it makes sense to talk about the other hero who's likely to be a big winner as the state of Overwatch shifts, and that's Baptiste. When I last made this video, Baptiste had only recently been released and it was still unclear what his role in the game would be. However, a lot has been cleared up now. Firstly, his immortality field is definitely very strong as people predicted, and in some respects, you might even say it's a little bit too strong. The ability to make allies immortal and to ensure that they cannot die for at least a couple seconds if the enemy team does focus their lamp, and even longer if they don't, is incredibly powerful. On top of that, Baptiste's healing output is really high, and he's a hero who can build his ult almost as fast as Moira, and sometimes even faster, which is quite something. Then, when you do build his amplification matrix, he can ramp up to a crazy amount of healing, but actually and more importantly, a ridiculous amount of damage too. Remember that recently, Bap received a buff to his damage, so it's very likely that when you watch pro players use this hero, they will almost exclusively use the amp matrix just for themselves to then basically turn into a DPS hero for the next few seconds. They'll often secure multiple kills in a short space of time, and to be honest, if you can hit your shots, Baptiste basically becomes one of the best DPSs in the game when you have amp matrix up. Now, with the upcoming nerfs to shields, Baptiste might be even stronger. Even though Orisa Sigma will still probably be the best tank line, now that shields are breakable, you can have even more impact as Baptiste. Not only can you contribute to the shield break, but all those things I mentioned above, being able to heal a lot, being able to amplify damage, and get kills, all those things become even more effective when shields aren't around. So overall, Bap is in a really good place, so feel free to pull him out, particularly if you have other heroes on your team who can also benefit from using the amp matrix. Now on the flip side of this scale is my and a lot of the Overwatch community's favorite healer, Ana. Now people love Ana because she's so rewarding and there's so much playmaking potential with her. But unfortunately, she's found it tough going recently because, more than most supports, she really suffers from not being able to get past shielding. Even with the shield nerfs, she's not someone who interacts with shields too well. Unlike Zen or Baptiste, her damage to shields isn't really great, and you really don't want your Ana sitting there chunking primary fires into shield breaking. That's not to say she can't be played, and there are definitely still situations when you can pull her out. Generally, if you're good with Ana, you will find value. It's just that you could have probably gotten value easier with other supports right now. That being said, if the other team isn't running a lot of shields, and say they're running Orion Zarya or a dive comp, then all that goes out the window, and Ana again becomes a really strong pick. In terms of balance, she's still in a really good place, so if you do get that chance, then you should absolutely go ham. Land those nades, hit those sleeps, and watch the enemy crumble before you. I should also note that if you do want to run dive comps, then Ana is probably really key because the damage amplification from Nano Boost is very important to break through that high sustain that most comps are running these days, particularly if you do play Genji, though I'm not sure why you'd really want to do that right now. Next up, let's talk Zen. Now with the introduction of Rollock, Zen took a really heavy hit to his viability because he thrived in being a hybrid, a character who could output a lot of damage but contribute to healing too. Now that you can only run 2 heals, and aggressive comps have given way to sustain comps, Zen has slowly faded out of existence to the point of being a non-pick. But there is light at the end of the tunnel. With the new shield nerfs, it's very likely that Zen will at least see some more play. Because he can actually output damage while healing, Zen can definitely contribute to damaging shields, which will now actually go down and break. That means that once there are no barriers in his way, Zen can go back to hitting heads and taking over games. He's still very squishy, and that's a problem when needing to survive is so key, but much like Ana, if you're good at this hero, you will still get lots of value. Another interesting thing to note about Zenyatta is that his ultimate has also shifted in value. Previously, in the GOATs and Grav metas, Zen's Transcendence was almost a must-have to counter the huge amounts of damage that will be following up. But now that Sigma has taken over, the Trans can often feel quite inadequate for countering Gravitic Flux. Unlike with Graviton Surge, which groups people up and increases the effectiveness of Trans, Gravitic Flux keeps enemies split apart and has quite a large area of effect, which means that if your teammates are too far away to be healed, your Trans might go to waste, and that's why Lucio Sound Barrier has been the support ult of choice so far, so bear that in mind. But again, see what you come up against. Against Ryan Zarya, Trans will still be as good as ever, and against dive comps too, your Trans might just be needed to counter ults like Dragon Blade. Now, moving on to Brig, she's another hero who may well be a big winner with both the shield nerfs and the armor buffs. Unlike most heroes, Brig was actually changed alongside the arrival of 222, and her new armor pack system allows her to provide multiple packs, which means that she's a lot more useful now outside of direct engagements as well. If you do run aggressive Reinhardt based comps, Brig might just be as strong as ever, because she can be armoring multiple people, keeping her Inspire healing up, and dropping Valley armor to people as well. In a lot of ways, Brig's role in the game has become closer to what it was many months ago. She's still capable of shutting down dive very hard, and as long as you brawl, she'll give you great value. On top of that, if the meta does go back to what it was during Stage 4 of Overwatch League Season 2, that being Rodorisa, Mei Hanzo, then Brig isn't terrible there either, because she's actually capable of keeping both Rode and Mei in check, not only because she can armor allies about to be killed by them, but also because she can stun and knock them away from her team at key times. So if you build your comp accordingly, and you factor for having a Brig, then you might just find that a lot of people will start clamoring about how OP she is again. Finally, let's talk about the most played hero in the game, Mercy. In a lot of ways, despite all that's going on around her, not much has changed for Mercy. She wasn't meta during GOATs, and she wasn't meta during Double Shields. However, I don't think that really matters to players who like this hero. She's still strong at doing exactly what she was strong at before. In terms of enabling other teammates, there still really isn't a better support pick. Fire Mercy is great, and might be even stronger now that shields will break faster, and the damage boost to an Ashe, Widowmaker or McCree is still strong to the point of feeling almost unfair when you come up against it. Valkyrie is still a good ult and can bypass shields, unlike a lot of other abilities. Another thing to note is that Mercy players are getting better all the time with using her limited kit to get value. So for example, people have now managed to consistently pull off her super jump, which makes her that much harder to kill. So Mercy players, I think you guys are still good to keep on doing what you've been doing. And although that's a rather anticlimactic way to end the video, it's just kinda true. So that's all I got for today, guys. But a quick note to anyone watching this video on release, on Saturday, the 30th of November, I'm going to be hosting episode 2 of my podcast Group Up, where I'll be talking a lot more in detail about the PTR changes and how they might affect the game, along with a few other topics. So if you want to hear more, then please do tune in. I'll be joined by my co-host Frito, and this time we'll be talking to former Dallas Fuel coach Gosu Peak, who has some great analysis about the game, so I don't think you'll want to miss it. But I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope you like the idea of updating the Thought Process series, because a lot of people have been asking for up-to-date information on which hero to pick and why, now that 222 has been put in the game. As always, I want to give a big shout out to my patrons who do the awesome job of supporting me. But that's it from me. I'll be back next week with another video. See you guys soon.